So, for the last several weeks, God has been talking to me about rest, about being at rest and resting in Him. And if you're in my Facebook group, you know that we've been discussing this as well. So, you'll probably hear some of the same things today. Uh, but I think what God has been teaching me is that I have spent a whole lot of my life just striving. And, and even though I'm better at it, there's still room for improvement, and there's still areas that I can definitely use some work in. Uh, and we all know that the world says do, 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 and it's always wanting and requiring more. Take a company, if the company looks at productivity and are always looking at how they can get more. If you're in sales, if you hit your sales goal, you don't even get to, really celebrate hitting your sales goal, because it's like, okay, now what percent do we want to up that? It's just the constant more. And I think we can also find ourselves, though, striving to do more, for God, or for striving to get God's approval, or even to please Him. And I think what God is trying to teach me is that I already have His approval. I am already accepted, and I'm already chosen. And yes, we've talked about all of these, and on Sunday mornings, Scott's doing our Ephesians, and we're talking about that, our identity in Christ. And, I think the more we know our identity in Christ, I think the less that we will strive, as well. We first hear about rest in the book, in the first book of the Bible. So in Genesis 2:2 says, on the seventh day, God ended His work, which He had done, and He rested on the seventh day from all His work, which He had done. Verse 3 says, then He blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it He rested from all His work, which God had created and made. So since Genesis, is the first book of the Bible, then it sets precedent. And so God made it very clear that He values rest. So, and that should be good news to us, because God's valuing rest. He's telling us to rest. And we are also told in the Ten Commandments to remember the Sabbath day and to keep it holy. So He gave rest, not just to the people, but when you read that, He gave rest to, so the servants are to rest, and even the animals were to rest. So, this should make this important to us on getting rest. And then I think about even in the wilderness, God kept the Sabbath. They didn't go get manna on that seventh day. So, they had to pick it on the sixth day, or whatever, to pick it up. Or so, because the seventh was still, He says, keep my Sabbath. So when we look at the Old Testament, I think we see things, physically, and I think it is like a foreshadow of the things that we will see, how things work also in the spirit. So, we obviously need physical rest. We also need rest for our soul, our mind, our heart, our spirit. Now, Jesus tells us in Matthew 11:28-30, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So I looked up in like the Strong's concordance and, some of these words, and like the word labor, and it says to feel fatigue, work hard, toil, or be wearied. And heavy laden, to load up, to overburden with ceremony or spiritual anxiety. And then it talked about the soul. It said it was the spirit, the mind, and the heart. And, I think about when Jesus walked on this earth, He came at a time when the Israelites were under the Roman rule, but the people were also heavy laden with all the rules from the religious leaders. They had them put on there. You got all the ceremonial things to do. And if you'll remember, they tried to enforce those rules on Jesus. They got very upset with Jesus because He, healed on the Sabbath, and he did things that they didn't approve of. So while we don't necessarily have the same burdens, how many of us strive or are heavy laden with worry or anxiety over something or someone? Again, if we come from a religious or a legalistic background, we may still be striving, as I've already mentioned, kind of to earn God's love or his approval. Several in this room have, prodigals, and that can be a burden. That can burden us down because, obviously we love them and we want to see them to come to God. And then the list goes on. And, yet Jesus tells us to come to him. And then other verses tell us to abide in him, trust in him, hope in him. And I know that's easier said than done, especially at certain times and in certain situations. Let me strengthen my paper. But it doesn't make his invitation any less valid. I think so. Yep. So he invites us to do these things. And even though it's hard, that doesn't make his invitation any less valid, because he wants the best for us. And if he's giving us the invitation, then it's going to be possible to do. Now, when I was thinking about all this, and with him talking to me about rest and different things over this last few days and a couple of weeks, one of the verses that came to my mind was Psalms 37:4. It says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." And if I'm being honest, I think that, God was showing me that I was striving to get the desires of my heart. I was adding on more than just delighting in him, getting into those works. But he had a surprise for me, because I did a word search on, I think it's Bible.com or something like that. But I did a word search on the word delight. And so what I was expecting to be like the first verse that popped up was the Psalms 37:4. But one of the first verses that came up was actually Numbers 14:8. And it said, "If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into the land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey." Now, this was when the spies, of course, came back. They'd gone to Canaan, they spied out, and this is Caleb and Joshua. They're speaking to the crowd, trying to get them to see that, they could go take this land. They could take the land because God had given them his word. The Lord was with them, and so, we know the story, but it was another 40 years before the Israelites entered the promised land. They needed to trust him more. They needed to rest in his word and his character, in his track record. And I'm not accusing them, because I need to trust him more and rest in him more, as well. And I know that I have read, I've read this many times, the account of the Israelites. I mean, that's very popular, something we hear all the time. But I don't know, something about when I was reading that, and it just, when it said God delights in us, or God delights in me, it was like, it just struck me different. It just kind of stood out at me, and it was in a good way, because I come from this background of striving. Again, like I mentioned, striving to please God, striving to please others and be accepted by them. It's it's like a performance mentality. And as I continued to look through the word search, there were several other verses that spoke of God delighting in us. 2 Samuel 2:22 said, "He led me to a place of safety. He rescued me because he delights in me." 1 Kings 10:9 and 2 Chronicles 9:8 talks about God delighting in Solomon and sitting him on the throne. Psalms 37:23 and 24, it's another pretty common verse. "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he, God, delights in his ways. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholds him with his hand." So, so what's my point in all of this? So I think it goes with the cultivating an intimate relationship with God. The closer we get to him, the more we will rest in him. But we aren't supposed to strive to get there. we're not supposed to strive to get to that rest and to get to that intimate relationship, I don't think. So, it's kind of like, in marriage, you fall in love, you get married, and then you spend, the rest of those years getting to know each other and, getting more comfortable with each other and, falling more in love with each other. So Jesus gives us examples with the stories of like the vine and the branches, when he talks about us abiding in him. And I think with the analogy of the seed time and harvest, the farmer can teach us a lot. Let's talk about things being out of their hands. They're responsible for their part, but the temperatures, how much it rains, when it rains, insects and other things like that, totally out of that farmer's control. And but every year, they're still farming and stuff. They just know they have to go in that flow. So I want to get to that place that I truly am resting in God. And I feel like I'm getting there. I'm much better. There was a time in my life that I was a constant worrier. And, people would just say, stop worrying. And I would say, show me the button and I'll be glad to do that. It just doesn't happen. But with God, we can always go deeper. And I think he is inviting us, to go deeper. And I'll use the analogy here of the ocean because I don't have like an actual physical object today to give you an object lesson. We've got something else we're going to share in just a second. So you'll just picture this in your mind. If you go to the ocean and you step in and you let that water cover your feet, you can honestly say that you've been in the ocean. But there's so much more. You can't swim or you can't surf, can't snorkel if you're just standing at that very edge. And he beckons us, come out a little deeper, come out a little deeper. And he is that gentle father who is saying, I've got you. It's okay. He doesn't grab us and toss us in, the deep way over our head. He gently keeps trying to get us to trust him a little more and a little more. And as I've already said, I want to learn to rest in him more like that. And the more I read about his delight in me, that, again, going back to I'm chosen and that adopted, the more relaxed I get in that relationship. And the more I'm learning to rest. I think one thing, so like our facilitators are the ones that kind of go over your questions and stuff, the leaders on these groups, they really would like to have our discussion questions at least the day before, but they usually get them the morning of because God doesn't give that. And I think part of that is, I've been thinking about it. I think he's teaching me to trust him and to let go of my timing and to trust that, yes, he's going to give me what I need when I need it. And so, because I would like to have this all done on Monday, instead of, he's given me things, but as I mentioned before, it's usually the day, Thursday night. Sometimes it's early morning on Friday mornings, but I think he's just using that again to teach me to trust him more and to let go and to learn to be at peace in a situation that, I want it to be something different. And another awesome verse that, that came to me, I put this on Facebook yesterday, actually, was Zephaniah 3:17. The Lord your God is living among you. He is a mighty Savior. He will take delight in you with gladness. With his love, he will calm your fears. He will rejoice over you with joyful songs. And that's in the New Living Translation. But, it's just so peaceful when you read that, and it's just so loving. And going back to Matthew 11, 28 through 30, Jesus tells us, to take his yoke upon us and learn from him. We've learned several things over the years. We've learned from a lot of people. We learn from our parents. We learn from, our Sunday school teachers, our preachers, our teachers in school, the world in general, books. But it doesn't mean that everything we've learned has always been correct. Now, I'm not saying that it wasn't, and, I'm sure most of it, for the most part, has been. But who better to learn from? Who knows those deeper meanings of things? I think of the times in the Bible when Jesus said, "You have heard it said, but I say." And I know, even for me, there were times that, when I really started getting into reading his word, I did discover that, hey, there was things that I was taught that's not what the word said. And so, we need to get in that. We need to get in his word. We need to be in his presence for ourselves, learning and seeing, if things are lining up. So cultivating an intimate relationship with him will give us deeper revelation. And one thing I love about reading the verses that say he delights in us or tells us about our identity, or that Jesus is saying, "Come and learn from me," it shows us that this relationship isn't one-sided. It's not just us, God saying, just do this and do this. He's drawing us. He gives the invitation. And, and plus we have to remember that he's told us, he loved us first. If he hadn't come for us, if he wasn't reaching out to us, we wouldn't have been reaching out to him. So I have a question of, where is your relationship with him? Because it's never too late. It's never too late to start deepening that relationship. And there's always more. And when we're talking about this, talking about that resting and things like that, then Diane, are you ready? You want to come up? She's going to share just a testimony a little bit with us. This was in our Facebook group the other day, but it was just so good. I thought it would be good for you to share.
Please bear with me. I've never done anything like this before. But I really felt like God was asking me to share. You can't hear this better? Okay. So many of you know I had a prodigal daughter return back in May. She walked away from Jesus about 13 years ago. And from that point, her life just spiraled into deeper and deeper debauchery. And then in 2020, she went off to Maine and married a man who was 50 and cut off all communication with us. And the Lord healed my heart in a beautiful way. And that's another story for another day. Today we're talking about rest. And what's that?
Share whatever God lays on your heart.
Okay. So in the end of 2022, my son called one day and said that Holly had called him and she was very sick, couldn't take care of herself, and was going to be evicted. So we were able to contact her. And the next day, my husband went to Delaware, drove her home in a pickup truck with everything she owned, and she came to live with us, very, very sick. And it was hard. There was a lot of chaos in our house, a lot of deception, a lot of spiritual warfare, and it was hard. And the Lord kept telling me to rest. And it's hard to rest when you're a mom and your child is sick. You don't know what's wrong. You're trying to help her, trying to sort out what's spiritual, what's physical. I had also had my hip replaced 6 days after she landed on our doorstep. And so it was a hard time for me. And the Lord kept telling me to rest. And I rested sometimes. Most of the time I didn't rest because I had an internal upset in me. And my life verse was be still and know that I am God. But it's hard to do that when you have this drama in your house and you just want it to stop. And long story short, she ended up coming back to Jesus in a very miraculous way. He just revealed himself to her. It was nothing anyone did but the Lord. And he revealed himself to her in May of this year. And she's an entirely different person. I mean, she has done 180 degrees. Um, just that beautiful spirit she had as a child. And loves the Lord, on fire for the Lord now. It's just in 2 months, it's amazing what he's done. But what I want to say to you is that the Lord was telling me to rest all that time. And I should have found more of a place of rest in my spirit instead of trying to fix and trying to solve and trying to ask God, well, why is it not changing as fast as I would like? She wanted to go to that Asbury revival. Remember that Asbury revival? Well, she was so intrigued by it, and we took her, but nothing happened. And I was mad. I was like, well, Lord, she was around all these people. She saw all of this, and she wanted to do it in his time and in his way. And if I'd have known what he was going to do back then, I could have rested so much easier. But we can still rest. If he's telling us to rest, then he knows why. And we just have to trust him at his word. And as hard as it is, take that step and trust him and believe him. I can remember when my anxiety got to a fever pitch, I would rest because I knew I was being disobedient at that point. But I could have rested so much better and I could have had so much more peace during those months when she was living in our house and there was so much drama because we can trust God. He knows what he's talking about. So take the step and trust him.
Okay, so she had shared that in our Facebook group, and I'm like, what better example than someone who's walked it, instead of just the theory of it or things, but to have somebody who will share, and that's part of that's what we're doing. We're connecting and sharing and serving and growing. So while I was preparing this, something came to my mind. This is something I had found years ago, and occasionally I'll get it out and read it again, and you may have heard it, but I want to read it to you, and I want you to just be able to sit here and hear it. And it's called The Father's Love Letter. And you may have heard it before. You can actually, Google it, and there's a guy on there, reading it. It's got your music behind it and everything like that. But just take a minute, just calm yourself. And I want to read this and just read it to you. And you just imagine that there's things God's saying to you. And everything in this is a verse from the Bible. It's a verse out of the Bible they put together. And it says, "My child, I know everything about you. I know when you sit down and when you rise up. I am familiar with all your ways. Even the very hairs on your head are numbered. For you were made in my image. In me you live and move and have your being. For you are my offspring. I knew you even before you were conceived. I chose you when I planned creation. You were not a mistake. For all your days are written in my book. I determined the exact time of your birth and where you would live. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. I knit you together in your mother's womb and brought you forth on the day you were born. I have been misrepresented by those who don't know me. I am not distant or angry, but am the complete expression of love. And it is my desire to lavish my love on you, simply because you are my child and I am your father. I offer you more than your earthly father ever could, for I am the perfect father. Every good gift that you receive comes from my hand, for I am your provider and I will meet all your needs. My plan for your future has always been filled with hope because I love you with an everlasting love. My thoughts toward you are countless as the sand on the seashore, and I rejoice over you with singing. I will never stop doing good for you are my treasured possession. I desire to establish you with my heart, with all my heart and all my soul, and I want to show you great and marvelous things. If you seek me with all your heart, you will find me. Delight in me, and I will give you the desires of your heart. For it is I who gave you those desires. I am able to do more for you than you could possibly imagine. For I am your greatest encourager. I am also the Father who comforts you in all your troubles. When you are brokenhearted, I am close to you. As a shepherd carries a lamb, I have carried you close to my heart. One day I will wipe away every tear from your eyes, and I'll take away all the pain you have suffered on this earth. I am your Father, and I love you, even as I love my son Jesus. For in Jesus, my love for you is revealed. He is the exact representation of my being. He came to demonstrate that I am for you, not against you. And to tell you that I am not counting your sins. Jesus died so that you and I could be reconciled. His death was the ultimate expression of my love for you. I gave up everything I loved that I might gain your love. If you receive the gift of my son Jesus, you receive me, and nothing will ever separate you from my love again. I have always been your father and will always be father. I have always been father and will always be father. My question is, will you be my child? I am waiting for you. So, yeah, it's just, and it's got a few verses in there, a few lines. It's kind of for, I guess it's a, for that lost or that prodigal person, because a couple of lines says, come home and I'll throw the biggest party heaven has ever seen and stuff. So, but yeah, I'll put the thing in there. I'll put it in the Facebook page. So, okay, so that's what I've got going on today.